Next is memory. So we have seen computer memory. Memory is also called RAM. So there are different types of RAM. The CPU itself has a bit of memory inside it, which are called registers. There are different levels of caches in CPU. They are also short-term memory for the CPU. But when we say computer memory, mostly we refer to the RAM, random access memory. So let's see how a RAM looks. So I'm going to the wiki page of a computer memory. This is how a RAM looks, modern RAM. So coming back to the slides, so we have seen CPU and computer memory. CPU is for computing, computer memory is for remembering things. So next part we would like to discuss is disk or secondary storage. Disk is also very similar to memory. There is one big difference between disk and memory. Memory always needs power. If the power goes, the RAM or the memory gets wiped out. So we cannot trust the data inside the memory after that, once you lose the power. On the other hand, disk, even if the power goes, the memory remains. Disks normally are larger in size and they are comparatively very slower than the actual memory, the random access memory, RAM. In a computer system, normally they are treated as devices. Memory is normally not treated as devices. We'll see the difference probably sometime later again. Let's have a look at a couple of disk storage device, how it looks. Yeah. So I'm going to the wiki link of disk storage. In the modern days, we have two kinds of disk. One is the HDD, which has a rotating disk inside. And second category of disk we have in the modern days is called solid state devices. They are very small. They are again chip like the CPU and memory. We're gonna see both of this type of device in our demo. So this, yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So does a single CPU has both of them, HDD and SDD, or it comes with just one of them?
CPU doesn't come with a disk, but you can plug in as many disks as you want to a motherboard, which is connected to a CPU. So the connection is CPU is connected to the motherboard and all the disks are connected to the motherboard as well. So you can connect any number of disks provided the motherboard supports. You can connect any number of disks as much as you want. So your limit is your operating system, your file system, not the CPU. CPU is not the limit for your disk. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a very bad question.
Oh, that's okay.
No.
Yeah, that's fine. No, there is no bad questions. Always, there's no bad questions. Yeah. So this is how normally a disk looks. I think this is a pretty old one. They are pretty compact. So the smaller one on the right side, they are pretty much probably on the modern size. So this is pretty much how a disk with HDD looks, which has a rotating device. So this animation we're gonna see is going to show the speed of different computer memory. So we have seen disk, we have seen solid state, we have seen a CPU cache, which is the memory inside the CPU registers, a lot of different types of memory we discussed. So how all of this stack together, that's what we're gonna see shortly. So this is the entire spectrum of the memory. In the top of the spectrum, we have CPU registers. CPU registers is the fastest of all kind of memory, fastest and the smallest. So that's why they are on the top of the pyramid. So they are very less. They are in bits and bytes. Next is the L1 cache. So normally the modern CPU, like the Intel CPU and the AMD CPU, most of them has two level of cache, level 1 and level 2. Next is a level 1 cache, which is a reflection of the memory itself, which is very similar to memory. L2 cache is again slower than L1 cache, but bigger than L1 cache. Next is the memory itself, that chip we saw in the wiki, or the actual chip. The first three things in this diagram is inside the CPU, that chip itself. Remember the video which we watched in the YouTube, the AMD chip, that's a CPU. So it is inside that. And next is the SSD. SSD, we have not seen SSD. It is solid state. It's a secondary type of storage. It is made of chip. We're gonna see the demo, the actual SSD in one of the operating system we're gonna install into the SSD in our demo. And finally, the disk. Disk is the one which we just saw in the wiki. Disk is the biggest and slowest.
A question.
Yeah.
So disk is slower than RAM.
That is correct.
Why is it? Is it because it is connected to CPU via buses, or RAM is directly connected to CPU?
Okay, very good question. Yeah. So let me rephrase the question. Why disk is slow? Why RAM is faster? As you might have guessed, the answer is correct. RAM has a very high speed bus connected to the CPU, and the way we access RAM is completely different from way we access memory in a disk. Traditional disk has moving parts, so you need to move something, physically move. So there are rotating disks sitting inside that thing we saw a round disk. That's how it gets that name. So that thing rotates. So it's a physical thing we need to do. On the other hand, RAM is completely electronics. There is absolutely no moving parts. It is very close to the CPU. It doesn't have any moving parts. CPU has direct access to RAM. On the other hand, reading from a disk is more complicated process. We will get to that in the chapter 3. First you need to contact the bus controller, then disk controller. Lot of third-party people are there in between CPU and disk. Yeah, proximity is definitely one of the reasons. Make sense? Yeah. All right. So a little bit about the motherboard. So as we discussed, motherboard is connecting everything. So if CPU is a car engine, the body of the engine is the motherboard. Body connects the wheels, steering, the seats, everything together, That's it all of motherboard. Motherboard also has chipsets installed in it. Chipsets are nothing but allows the communication between different devices and CPU flawless, and CPU understands what the devices are talking. Devices understand what CPU is talking. Similarly with memory, all the communications are happening through motherboard. The major part of motherboard is nothing but a set of wires we call bus, the BUS bus, just the bus in the road, but the meaning is completely different here. So it's a set of wires at the end of the day. So let's have a look at the motherboard. Let's look at the wiki of a motherboard. It's just a big PCB at the end of the day. Probably here it is. So this is around 1 feet square. This is a 1 feet square. We're gonna see it here in our demo. I think this is a pretty old board actually. Let me see if I can pinpoint a couple of parts for you. This is the CPU, and this is a heat sink. Whatever is pretty big and looking shiny, they are normally heat sinks. They are not really any active parts. So this white thing you're seeing here, this white thing is slots for different devices. So this is PCI slots we're gonna see in our board. These are different ports where USB and rest of the things is getting connected. This is one of the chip, the bus controller. It is one of the bus controller chip. You will see a lot of such chips inside motherboard. So the primary purpose of those chips is to make the different things communicate each other correctly. They are basically translators, to language translators. This is where the RAM is connected. I don't know if you can see it here. Pretty dark. There is a strip kind of thing. So we will see it anyway. I'm just showing it in this picture. So yeah, that's pretty much motherboard. And one thing which we need to understand about motherboard is always specific to CPU. If a motherboard works for Intel CPU, it may not work for AMD CPU. And they are different for versions of Pentium than the i7. So if you're purchasing a CPU, you need to get a compatible motherboard as well. There is no need of any other graphics card will work with most of the motherboards. Disk will work with most of the motherboards. USB, it work with pretty much anything. But CPU and motherboard, they need to be paired. You need to get compatible CPU. So the one we're gonna see here in the demo is AMD motherboard and CPU.